So Watch Dogs Legion came out in late 2020 and is the third and most recent entry in the Watch Dogs franchise. It is set in a futuristic dystopian version of London, and it focuses on the London branch of DedSec as they attempt to clear their name after being framed for a series of terrorist attacks. They are also attempting to liberate the country from Albion, a private military company that has turned London into a surveillance state following the terrorist attacks. So by the time news came around about this game, I had already played the first two and I was eagerly anticipating this one. I didn't play it until 3 years later, specifically in late 2023, and I have to say, yet again, I agree with the general consensus, that being that Watch Dogs Legion was a disappointment. In fact, I would go as far as to call it the worst of the trilogy. It's not terrible, but it absolutely pales in comparison to Watch Dogs 2. How the game turned out the way it did, I don't know. I mean, the developers had extra time, but that extra time took place mostly during COVID, so I guess that's a factor. There's a couple of good things I liked and a bucket load of things I hated about this game, so I'm just gonna go over them very quickly. The game's depiction of a dystopian London was a pretty interesting choice, especially the futuristic cyberpunk aesthetic of it. You even get drones and Albion's security forces patrolling the streets, but on the whole, the open world itself felt kind of dull. You know, it lacks character like the first two games, and the overall size of it does not make up for the lack of substance. The graphics are also a tad bit inconsistent. While the saturation and color grading are okay at best, some of the graphical textures feel rough and unfinished. The hacking is largely recycled from Watch Dogs 2, though there are some small incremental upgrades here and there. You can hack into different types of drones, and from there you'll have other options like disabling the drones, taking control of them, and you can even do the same with turrets in this game. There's even some stuff you can do when you're up against enemies, such as disable their weapons and jamming their radio signals. You'll usually have a spider bot on you that can be used to sneak into certain locations, and it even has hacking capabilities of its own. The game's biggest selling point, which helps it stand apart from the first two, is the ability to recruit NPCs, meaning that you won't simply get to play as one or two characters, but many characters. Each character that you recruit has their own unique ability, whether it be enhanced hacking skills, maybe they carry a melee weapon like a wrench, maybe they have firearms, some of them have their own personal vehicles too. You can even recruit employees such as construction workers and even Albion's very own security guards. And they can sneak around easily in specific locations, whether it be construction sites or properties that are being surveilled or run by Albion. One of my favorite characters I recruited upon playing the game was a spy. He's got a silenced pistol, a watch that can jam weapons, and his very own car that comes with an invisibility cloak, kind of like the one from Die Another Day. To recruit a character, you'll have to complete a recruit mission for them. Once you've completed it, you would have convinced them to join DedSec. I must warn you that if you're not careful, your characters could end up being arrested by the cops, kidnapped by street gangs, or critically injured, and in some cases, killed permanently. Plus, if all of your recruits end up being arrested, or critically injured, or kidnapped or killed, and you have no one left to play with, it's game over. However, while I did enjoy this very unique addition to the franchise, I also have my issues with it because the individual characters themselves have perks and certain feats and attributes, but they lack personalities. And the lack of a central main protagonist kind of shatters any emotional impact intended by the game's storyline. The combat in this game is pretty standard, although it can be enjoyable in all of the right circumstances. You're only allowed to use 2 weapons at a time, but there's a pretty decent selection of items, such as a stun pistol, a stun rifle, a stun grenade launcher, and your typical lethal weapons such as pistols, rifles, and so on. And electronic brass knuckles that can do some serious damage to enemies. There's even a stealth-based mechanic in the form of an invisibility cloak, and it can be used to avoid detection or to sneak into specific areas, or even to sneak up around enemies before attacking them. But it does have a timer on it that runs out very quickly, so just keep that in mind. Customization is pretty much the same as it is in Watch Dogs 2, although it does include face masks due to their popularity around that time. Now, as for the game's story, it's painfully average at best. I mean, if you're familiar with the likes of George Orwell's 1984 or TV shows like Mr. Robot, it's nothing you haven't seen before. It's broken down into 5 major plot lines, so it can feel a bit unfocused and slow-paced earlier on. And I honestly couldn't be bothered to care for any of the characters, especially when there's so many of them. The game's missions have the same problem as Watch Dogs 2, where regardless of whether you're playing the main story missions or the side missions, a lot of them have the same layout and structure, although you can still approach them in different ways. And as for the side activities, there's bare knuckle tournaments, and even delivery missions where you have to deliver parcels. But beyond those 2 things, the game doesn't really have anything else to offer. So overall, this was yet another disappointing entry in the Watch Dogs franchise. And while it can be fun at times, it's very shallow and underwhelming compared to its predecessor. So I'm gonna give it a 5 out of 10. So those are my thoughts on the Watch Dogs franchise as a whole. I guess the big question is, do we need a 4th Watch Dogs game? I don't think so. I guess the franchise has served its purpose for the time being. As a whole, I find it to be a very messy and inconsistent franchise, with one great game being sandwiched in between 2 very mediocre ones. Though I would still encourage you to go out and buy the first 2. The 3rd one, maybe rent it, or at the very least, see if you can get it at a discount. I know there's also a paid expansion for Watch Dogs Legion called Bloodline, which sees the return of both Aiden Pierce and Wrench, but I haven't played it, and maybe I will one day, who knows. And yeah, I suppose that's it. Those are my thoughts on the Watch Dogs video game franchise. Thank you all so much for bearing with me. You know, this 3-part video series took about 6 weeks to produce, and I'm definitely relieved that I can focus on smaller projects now. So as for next time, guys, I'm gonna be starting my retrospective on The Leftovers, so look forward to that very soon. Thank you all for watching, guys. Please be sure to like the video, share it, and subscribe. Ring the bell. Take care, and I'll see you soon.